statistics on this, Bill. Levitated by the human touch.
Here's the pass. Antonio's through. Chance of 4. What a goal! What a brilliant strike by Michail Antonio!
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Knees Up Mother Brown podcast. Before we start this week, we would like to extend our condolences to the family and loved ones of young Isla Caton and to Hammers everywhere who have been hit by today's sad news. Obviously, not been the best day in terms of that front. We'd also like to wish our best to legendary club photographer Stevie Bacon too, who's having a tough time in hospital at the moment. Thoughts of the West Ham family are with you, good sir. All the best. It may seem trite to go on and continue into a podcast, but sometimes the mindless and the unnecessary are what we have when the crueler realities of life face us. So I'd like to welcome my co-hosts Jack Elderton and Callum Goodall. A good evening as we go on to discuss what we will be looking at this evening, which is a last-minute defeat at Old Trafford and some transfer tittle-tattle as we go into the last week of the transfer window. I'd like to again point listeners in the direction of the excellent articles these kids are producing onto their 25th day of daily transfer target talk, available every day on Knees Up Mother Brown, KUMB.com. If you would like to get in touch, all correspondence can be sent to any of the following: the email address podcast@kumb.com, the forum thread for those of you who visit us there, and you can tweet the boss on Twitter at kumb.com. That's all letters, as ever, no punctuation. We go to Manchester United then. The game at Old Trafford, Jack, and not everything we needed in a chase for the top four or any European football, really.
No, I did say on the last podcast that this was a great platform for us to recover. And that we needed that rather than a game against someone nearest the bottom. I think it was that, and I think it did not quite raise levels, but gave us an opponent around us that we needed to take points from. And unfortunately, we haven't done that. It wasn't the best performance. It's the worst possible result, but there are positives within it, and I think definitely glad now to be at the break because I think everyone can see how much we really need that.
Yeah, it's arguably a performance where tiredness came into things again, Callum.
Yeah, 100%. I think Jack's right to point out the legginess, and that's something we're going to come on to later on. But I think the break has definitely arrived at the right time. But the news that Antonio is going to be going out to Jamaica for 3 internationals has arrived at the wrong time. He arguably is the one player that probably needs a rest more than anyone. So you just got to hope they look after him out there and that the travelling doesn't take it out of him too much. But you can't do anything about it, and I wouldn't want to deprive him of the opportunity to represent his country either. As much as it would be beneficial to us, I think it would be unfair. I think so many footballers dream of that, don't they? So.
I presume he will be left out of the game, and our first game back is the weekend after at Kidderminster. You would assume he wouldn't be. I mean, it'd be quite nice to have him there just in case, but you'd assume he'd be rested and waiting up for a trip to Watford, which could well be a game against Roy Hodgson. And who'd have thought we'd be saying that again this season? It was one of those. It was one of those that really hit hard. It was a defeat that felt painful. The Leeds one felt painful. This felt painful in possibly a different way. The last minute, obviously, the last kick doesn't help. That it was a bit of a kick to the gut in that respect. But there were lots of positives, Jack.
Yeah, I think there were things within the performance that I don't think as a team performance that you could say would you draw out as major positives going forward, but definitely individuals coming back, making a big difference to the way we look as a side. I think particularly when you're looking at the defence, how spotty that has been in recent weeks and how much we've complained about it. And definitely we look to have a lot more stability in that area, which is a huge development for us going forward. I think, conceding 2 goals a game and conceding 4 or 5 chances a game is completely unsustainable for us to be able to get points on the board. And here, actually, we limited Man United to very little. And I think one of their better chances would have been the Fred chance before the goal, sort of early in the second half. And that's more of a mix up between Rice and Dawson and a quite fortunate ricochet. And actually, without that, I'm struggling to think of too many excellent chances they had. They had the one from the corner as well. But in terms of open play, I don't really think that they threatened us all that much. And I think that's a really big positive going forward. I don't, there's not necessarily the greatest barometer to use, Man United, at the moment, because they're not the most free-flowing attacking unit. But they're a team in the top half of the table, the team in and around us that we've managed to limit, and hopefully that will provide some confidence for that sort of defensive midfield unit going forward into the games we've got coming up, because we really, really need to get some form back on.
If I remember correctly, it was the League Cup game earlier in the season where their chances, it wasn't chances, the value of their shots. I think it was the first time you kind of taught me about the kind of average chance, basically the quality of it. And it felt similar again at the weekend, Callum. They weren't really they were having often shots. There was a volume of shots going in, but probably from ranges we were quite happy about.
Yeah, I think so. And I think part of that is probably with who's come back into the team. You've got Soucek, who is an accomplished shielder and someone you absolutely would much rather have sitting in front of that back four than Lanzini, which we talked about on the last episode of the podcast. And that gives some much more confidence and also ability in that sense. And then obviously the return of Zouma was much needed. And it was obvious to see what an improvement he made, despite not being completely fit yet, clearly. But a half-fit Zouma is much better than a fully fit Diop at present. And I think it was within the first 5 minutes it became really obvious how integral both Soucek and Zouma are, because I think Dawson misplaced a pass onto Fernandes and him and Greenwood were bearing down on goal, and it looked, at least at the start of the attack, to be an almost certain shot on goal at least. But then Soucek and Zouma kind of teamed up and chased Greenwood down. Soucek did really well to press him, to force him to cut back onto his, I think he probably would have cut back onto his preferred left foot anyway, but meant he couldn't get the shot off early. And then by that time, Zouma was back to make the tackle. So both of those within the first 5 minutes, showing why they're so integral to our defence.
That was really where I was going to go first. I think it would have been the return of Zouma. I think I ended up giving him an 8 out of 10 just because, having watched Issa Diop for about 6 weeks, you end up kind of overjoyed at seeing a capable defender, Jack. But it is the first kind of talking point, the thing people would have noticed on the team sheet as well first. That was really good news at 2:00.
Yeah, massively gave us some hope going into the game. I was really positive after seeing the lineup. I think even Areola coming in, actually, I know Fabianski's, I think it's COVID, isn't it, that kept him out of this one. But Areola coming in was a big plus for me as well. I think Fabianski could have done a lot better on the goals in the Leeds game. And Areola, maybe that time has come. I think we've talked a lot about it this season so far, and we've had a lot of back and forth about it. And generally, my position has been that Fabianski hasn't really done enough wrong to lose the spot, and Areola, I'm not sure, has really done enough right in the games he's had to prove that he deserves the spot. But here, the combination of Areola and Zouma and the sort of the general defensive solidity compared with previous weeks tends to make me feel that might be the best way to go going forward. So those two coming in was a real positive for me. Soucek obviously back as well, and yeah, Zouma quite rightly pointed out that not quite fully fit, didn't necessarily have the fluency in possession that we'll hope he'll get back to. He's not quite comfortable playing on that side, but he is much better than he was against Man United. But yeah, just that covering ability is such a huge thing. It's such a huge thing for us, because generally the other centre-backs we've got at the club at the moment are going to make a mistake with Ogbonna out. So one of Dawson or Diop, they're going to make mistakes in games, and actually they're not that brilliant at covering things individually. And he's got that kind of athleticism to get back and cover things, and actually picks his tackles really well. And for example, one of the things that I really liked, which some Man United fans I'm sure will claim was a penalty. I really like the challenge on Ronaldo, because Ronaldo is soft to go down and there's absolutely nothing in it. So it's getting tight to him to not allow him the space to turn and get a shot off, or to assess things properly. And I think that's exactly the kind of, and he looks so confident and comfortable doing it. If you imagine Diop in that situation, it's like panic stations. He just looks very calm in challenging situations. So that really, really helps.
It's, I think it was described on BBC Radio later on as having both arms around the player and kicking him. They thought it was a penalty, which I absolutely baffled by.
Wasn't my view at all.
If the standard of penalty that you get as those teams is looked at on the Diego Jota scale, then it's hard to argue that anything isn't a penalty, I guess. It was an impressive game, wasn't it, Cal, for Zouma? Even though it wasn't as impressive as he well could be, he wasn't at his best. He was clearly, first game back from a proper injury as well. It's a muscle injury. It's probably one he's had to get used to kind of trust and confidence in as well. But it's just a step up in class. Yeah,
that's it. And the numbers confirm that as well. Like we say, a not fully fit Zouma has come in and won 100% of his defensive duels, reduced the number of ball losses in defence. I think Diop against Leeds had 8 ball losses and Zouma only had 5 against United. So that sort of concentration and composure at the back is perhaps what we've been missing most. I think, particularly in possession, that calmness, whereas Diop has been quite frantic and often turns over possession in dangerous areas. And I think there's still, as you say, more to come. Zouma's passing was below his season average, but I think that's probably him trying to get a feel for the team that he's come back into, because there's changes in that defence. I think last time he was fit, I think Sifal was probably out, so he was playing with Johnson, and the centre-back pairings were often changed, and he had Fabianski behind him. So fluency will come with that if that's the defence that he's going to be surrounded by. And I think I agree with Jack. I think the time for Areola to come into the team is probably now. I think Fabianski has had a really good start to the season and perhaps didn't do anything that warranted being dropped, but the performance against Leeds, he started to show signs of his age, and there's just a lack of pace and a lack of haste coming off his line. And I thought that was one thing that Areola, I don't think he was actually tested much at all. He did outperform his expected conceded goals, which is always nice. But I think there was one moment where he came, I think it was a free kick that had been whipped in, and he came quite far off his line to claim it in the air. And that's something I've always questioned Fabianski about, is he's often quite reluctant to come and claim balls. He'd rather stay on his line and hope for his defenders to get there and make a save. And not often he does, he often has. But having someone who's more assertive in those situations, I think will be really beneficial going forward.
I can't work out if I actually think his kicking was better than Fabianski, or whether he just has an aesthetically pleasing technique compared to Fabianski.
Definitely the latter.
He does have it's something about, he looks like he knows, which sometimes Fabianski looks like he's a bit Sunday kicking a ball out, but I think it might be I'm falling for the gracer approach. But what you did mention earlier, which I thought was important, I'll get Jack's opinion on, was Soucek as well returning.
Yeah, I think just the having that added protection in front of the defence, again, having that sort of comfortability facing challenging defensive scenarios, especially when you're looking at recoveries and things like that. We saw how exposed Lanzini was in that position, not having the physical skill set or build or anything to be able to compensate in these situations. I think he does a really good job for someone as small as he is playing in that position, but to have someone with Soucek's height and strength and a general reading of the game, and also his stamina to get up and down, just adds so much into that area of the pitch. And just briefly wanted to touch on the two things before we were talking about with Zouma. I think I just wanted to sort of say about the calmness, generally setting the tone for everyone else as well. I talked about Diop being sort of like the Yannick Bolasie of centre-backs a few episodes ago, and that kind of sort of staccato nature of the way that you build up and the way it sets the tone for people around you, and the kind of anxiety on the ball. And the game was boring. The Man United game was boring, and having someone like Zouma in there allows it to be boring. It would never have been boring if you had Diop and Dawson in there, because you just have that chaos thing every time you start your first phase of possession.
That is the kind of faint, damning with faint praise, I suppose, a compliment that really damns Diop. It's always interesting when you watch the Diop.
But these games,
interesting.
The Palace game, the Leeds game, these games are just, they're chaotic. There's no real rhythm or structure to them. And it was nice to watch, frankly, it was nice to watch a boring game again, to say, okay, the defense is just confident right now. It's comfortable dealing with what it's dealing with. We can set the tone in the way that we want to. Yeah, we didn't attack as well as we know we can, but that level of confidence really helps. And the other thing on Areola, not on his kicking, but definitely on the assertiveness that Cal touched on. I had noticed in the few games prior that I'd seen someone, Dawson, actually turning around a few times and looking at Fabianski like, "Where's my shout?" And I think that had started to become a real problem, and it's lack of sort of assertiveness when he's dealing with situations, balls in difficult areas, but also just sometimes letting a centre back know that they've got the time on the ball to take a few more seconds. So the combination of having that from behind, I think Areola is much more of a communicator, and then having Zouma, someone who's much more comfortable on the ball, just really, really helps, and allows for a boring game like the game the other day.
And yeah, I was just to touch on Soucek. What the Soucek thing again allows, I presume, what was more of our favourable team, which is then pushing Lanzini into more of a 10. He doesn't really sit as high up. He kind of joins in that midfield. So again, which again offers us more control, which probably again also helps with that kind of that brilliance in boringness that we that we had in that game.
One thing I noticed against United, which again will have added to the boringness definitely. Is that against Leeds, I pointed out how noticeable Soucek's absence was in build-up, because he has this tendency to come deep and offer the centre-backs an option, almost like a third centre-back, but slightly higher up as an outball, and then it allows to create more space around him. And he was doing that against United really effectively, I thought. And it was kind of almost like a bridge between the defence and the midfield. He's not quite an out-and-out midfielder, and he's not quite a centre-back. He's just there in the middle, and then he can turn and lay it off to Rice or Lanzini or whoever it is else that's around him, or he can just as easily give it back to the centre-back and wait for more movement to happen as the United players are dragged around following people and creating space for him to turn and run into. So I think that was something that was a real noticeable difference from the Leeds game, and is proof that Soucek is absolutely integral to the system. As much criticism as he rightly or wrongly is subject to on Twitter sometimes.
I've looked to defend throughout this season. I suppose if we look at positives, you had it down in fact, Jack. So I will go to you as this is your kind of a positive for Bowen and Bowen's performance and a continuation of form, which I probably questioned that one, I guess. Although I suppose my answer would be, was it a consistent, or was it just showing those bursts where possible that showed that he's still maintaining that form?
I think he, particularly in the second half, showed that he was by far the most dynamic member of that front four, and was causing more problems than the others. And I definitely felt that there was a sense throughout the game, and one that definitely grew, as I said, in the second half, that Man United felt that he was the main threat, and the amount of bodies that they were having to commit to that area to stop him from being able to take 1-2 touches and start to face infield, where he can start to be a real threat to opposition defenders. He's so good at receiving the ball, protecting it, and then carrying inside. And I think the substitution was a big part of that, noticing that he was having a really big impact on the game, and just giving him the help to have someone going beyond to try and pull those sort of 2v1s or sometimes 3v1s back into 1v1s for him.
Is that why you thought Fredericks was brought on, to give that overlap?
Yeah, I think Soufal really struggled in the game. I don't think he played with his usual energy. I think we've seen a sort of lack of quality on the ball in the last couple of games as well. And if there's one thing that Fredericks can do is he can make those overlapping runs all game. And I think, like I was saying, Bowen is most threatening when he's allowed to kind of receive and turn inside and find teammates. He's so good at it. And if Man United are able to get people like McTominay across to him and Tellez pushed very tight, it's very difficult for him to turn and find that space. So he's often having to then, I mean, I saw him do it a couple of times in the game, actually. He's receiving and he dummies to turn inside, and then he then turns back and tries to go around on the outside down the touchline. And actually bringing Fredericks on is saying, well, he doesn't need to do that. We can actually just send the runner down the outside to pull Tellez, and then to give him the space to be able to do something much more threatening. So it was just like, you felt that at that point in the game, Antonio had sort of run out of energy, and in the last half an hour, it was going to be Bowen or no. I mean, it was like Bowen was the only person who looked like he was going to do anything. So it was like bringing Fredericks on was the way of maybe giving him a 1v1 where he can do something and create something for us. And I did just think he looked the most likely for a long period of the game.
But it was the one time you really noticed Man United probably stretched was possibly that run down the outside to where Maguire was forced to skiving, horrible tackle to take him down. And it was possibly the only time we'd really, other than an early Antonio run where he was never in control of the ball in classic Antonio fashion. Because otherwise the attack didn't really function perfectly, did it, Cal?
No, it didn't. It was very frustrating to watch in the final third. I think the build-up was a marked improvement than against previous teams, but it was unfortunately when we got there, it was just a huge drop-off, which was a shame. And I think Bowen probably was the most threatening, but I think that's almost the best of a bad bunch kind of shout in the context of the game. But I think it was also credit to United's defence in parts, because I think they did handle us quite well. Our left side tends to be the side from which we are most threatening, and unfortunately for us, Diego Dalot had a really brilliant game and kind of shut everything down on that side. So our usual outball wasn't there. Fornal is someone we've talked about in previous episodes as being a bit of a shining light in particularly against Leeds in an otherwise difficult game. And his final ball and decision making at times was quite questionable. I think in the previous two games he'd had 7 passes to the penalty area, which is way more than anyone in the team and considerably more than his season average of 3. But against United he dropped back down to just 1, and the one pass that he did make to the penalty area wasn't successful anyway. And I think probably the biggest sign of the sort of dysfunctioning attack is the complete lack of shots. I think we only had 6. Only one of them found the target, but that one was actually offside, and they just played on because it didn't come to anything. So I think it just wasn't clicking. Whether that's fatigue, whether that's like I say, United's kind of had us shut down. I don't know. It's difficult to say. But yeah, it was frustrating.
There are a couple of position changes in there as well that I think are probably worth talking about in terms of attacking fluency. If you think Lanzini's been playing in a deeper role and then has been shifted back into the 10, Fornal's been performing brilliantly in a 10, combining with Antonio and doing a lot of the pressing, and then he's shifted out left. So you're asking people to do different jobs to the jobs they've been doing in recent weeks in a fixture pile-up as well. So I do think there's kind of a different look to the front four. I think it was the right front four to select, but it's a very different front four to the one we've been playing with in recent weeks. So, I almost feel we've had a bit of chaos ball up front and a bit of chaos ball at the back, and kind of both went in the same game, and almost feel like it would have been nice if we'd stuck with a chaos ball at the top.
Yeah, I've suckered us in from the positives to my general negative feeling of everything, which leads me to the goal, because we're going to have to talk about it. And I suppose talking about kind of, and what was a game where we had some possession in good areas, or we had chances to make something that we then wasted. Rather than wasting the chance, we wasted the chance before the chance, arguably, if you're looking at it that way. The goal kind of starts off in a position where we actually have Lanzini has very good options. We have some possession up the pitch late on and could create something. Kind of 15 seconds later, it's in our own net. So if we're breaking down the goal, you would give a lot of the blame, Jack, to, if we're doing blame, and it's a harsh word, but I can't think of a better one. A lot of the blame to Lanzini on that.
Well, I'd attribute the turnover to Lanzini, and I think we were in a unthreatening situation until Lanzini makes the pass that he makes, and then suddenly you're asking people to make very quick decisions that are very challenging. Both Dawson and Bowen have really difficult decisions to make in split seconds that then lead to a counter attack that United score from. I actually think what you touched on about wasting the chance before the chance is really apt here, because I think this opening with 35 seconds to go is one of the best openings we've created in the whole match. And I think, on another day, Lanzini makes the right pass, and maybe we score the winner here, because the options created, I think it's really worth giving credit to the attackers. Antonio came in for a lot of criticism in this game and did look tired in the last half an hour, but his role in this is really important and the kind of thing that goes unnoticed with strikers, because it's all off the ball work. But it's Bowen who drops in deeper and draws Tellez within the same kind of thing you play to Bowen, and he's able to carry back, and United knew this was a threat, so then they stayed one-on-one with him, so that pulls Tellez out of position. And this is why, again, evidencing why the substitution to bring Fredericks on was useful, because Fredericks is able to go go beyond in this situation. And the important thing that happens between those two actions is Antonio's movement to the near side of the pitch, which draws Maguire across. And Soucek, very good at this kind of thing as well, responds really well by making a run to the far post, which means Varane can't come across because you've effectively got an additional striker. So now you've got a growing gap between the two Man United centre-backs and no left-back. So Maguire's having to play two positions effectively at this point, centre-back and left-back. Now he can do that if the right winger's not there, but if Fredericks makes the overlapping run, suddenly you've got a front three versus a front three again. So Fredericks does make the overlapping run, becomes the right winger, forces Maguire to become the left back, and suddenly Man United are playing with one centre back against two strikers because Antonio drops back onto the last line and makes his run towards the goal. And at this point, the ball's been cycled back to Lanzini under virtually no pressure, and he's got options wide right to Fredericks in a 1v1 with Maguire, where he's totally going to outpace him in the 93rd minute, or an option straight through the middle on his left foot, which couldn't be more simple if you wanted it to be, where he can literally play Antonio straight into a 1v1 with the keeper. And I think it's his mistake here, really, more than anyone else's. A lot of people have talked about Fredericks, a lot of people have talked about Cresswell, but these are reactive decisions that are always really challenging when you're in a counter-attack, like a 3v3 situation or even a 3v4 situation. Really difficult to deal with, particularly in the last minute of a game when people are tired. And Lanzini's decision really is the easy one that kind of sets the tone for the mistakes that then happen. So I think, he should pass forward, even if he's not confident he's going to make it. Just stick it, there's a crossfield switch on, or stick it into the corner. Plenty of better decisions than doing what he does, which is turn and play into a recovering press, which gives Dawson about 1.5 seconds to make a decision, which he actually does really well with. I managed to get the ball back out to Bowen, but then it's that kind of, I think Bowen, you can kind of see, if you watch this back, you can see Bowen pointing to the options ahead when Lanzini has the ball. And I think Bowen's very well aware that we've just created a really promising opening. So when he does try and bring the ball under control, he tries to take a first touch that's going to be really threatening rather than taking a touch that's going to bring the ball into secure possession. And that is probably the second big mistake for me. I think it's that is the naive decision within the whole thing. Is like, okay, the chance is gone, accept that, bring the ball under control, maybe win a free kick or it goes out for a throw in if you take the most secure touch you can. He tries to take it on the run and loses possession. And then from there, I think it's really, I understand the criticism for the defenders, but I actually think the most important thing is it's really excellent attacking play from United. Ronaldo taking 3 touches is brilliant because it draws 2. Martial actually does exactly the same thing, takes 2 touches inside, which forces both centre-backs to fix. Neither can choose to drop because he's coming towards goal, so both have to commit to Martial. That means that Cavani, who does really well to stay on side as well, gets the free run round the outside, and Cresswell probably can do better at tracking the run on the back post, but at the same time, by the time he's in that situation, it's very, very difficult, and if he does make it, he's more than likely scoring an own goal anyway. So for me, that's a relatively small mistake compared to the ones that have come before. So I would be more keen to praise United's attacking play once they win the turnover than criticise us.
When you talk through that now, my frustration with Fredericks does actually ease a touch because he's reacting to very, very good play. I slightly don't forgive Cresswell because I think he should be just covering the angle. Again, it's slightly like I was angry with him for the Leeds goal. I just think it's a slight level of basics he probably could do. But again, I suppose I'd rather he smashed it in the net than Rashford.
No, you're absolutely right. These are still mistakes. What I'm wanting to say is that there are bigger mistakes that happened before that create the whole situation. And I think it's really important to praise United for doing what they did.
Curse of being a defender, I suppose. You get kind of the sins of others end up kind of putting you under a lot more pressure. But that's the role, I guess. It was interesting to talk about Lanzini because it wasn't a game where Lanzini really looked, I don't know whether it was fit, whether it was he couldn't quite handle the shift in change of role, whether it was just that quality of opposition negates his influence. I don't know, Cal, but he wasn't kind of shining like he had maybe 2-3 weeks back. I don't know.
It was. We've rightly sung his praises in over the course of the last few episodes, and I, as much as anyone, was chuffed to see him come back in the team and hit this vein of form. But against United, he really wasn't up to scratch. In terms of his duels, he won 2 out of 14, I believe. So that kind of speaks volumes. He didn't win any defensive duels. I think he won 1 aerial duel and won 1 loose ball duel. his passing took a dip as well, which is the one thing that's usually constant for Lanzini, is that his passing success rate is usually very high, and it was still respectable. I think I've not got it in front of me, but it was around 88%. But usually he's about 94, so marginal drop off. But I think that can kind of be linked to the moment that Jack's been talking about, is kind of his security in possession almost overcame him in the run up to the goal, in the sense that perhaps he's so concerned with not trying that killer pass and ceding possession further up the field. He's trying to think so hard about how he maintains possession and plays what he thinks should be a simple pass, but just gets it wrong, and then leads to the situation that then results in the goal, which is unfortunate. But yeah, just I don't know, maybe needed some rest. I think the fact we only made one sub as well, when I think he was having quite a bad game throughout, to be honest. Perhaps could have been hooked off and maybe brought on a Vlasic or someone like that. But that's all in the past. So
it is an area that, I mean, it's an area I have reservations about. I would have criticisms about. It's one that has come up. It is, I mean, the substitutions or lack thereof, it can be levelly frustrating. Regardless, I suppose you have to say, if we'd have brought on, Noble and Krau, Noble and Vlasic, Krau, Vlasic, etc., we don't have, and it will be a long time before, if we ever do, have a squad where you can have the likes of Cavani, Rashford, and Martial that come off a bench, and that is in squad
combined for the goal.
Yeah, it was three there for the goal. It sounds, you go, that's unfortunate, but it's not unfortunate. It's not bad luck. There's a design in conceding late goals to fresh subs who can make things happen, Jack. And I guess it's something we can't really complain too much about in terms of what this squad is.
I think the most upsetting thing with these two games against Man United is that Man United have not been classic Man United all this season, but they've done a classic Man United against us in both games. These last minute goals, and I was Javier Hernandez used to do it for them. It's that that kind of, you have, when you're that size of club, you've got players you can bring off the bench that are match winners, and we've got good players that we can bring off the bench, but we haven't really got match winners who we can bring off the bench. And to have a player as experienced as Cavani and players as good as Rashford and Anthony Martial to bring off the bench, obviously it's going to make a huge difference. I do think, this was a bit classic conservative Moyes. I think a little bit more confidence might have gone a long way here. Lanzini coming off of Vlasic might have been a good substitution, generally just for energy, and also combating the absolute huge amount of mental fatigue in this squad at the moment. To bring someone on who's got a little bit of freshness for the last 10 minutes, I think would have helped, even from a conservative perspective. So it was sort of really extreme conservative ways, in my view, not to bring him on. I think it's just that classic, Lanzini's a bit more secure in possession. Vlasic just given the ball away for a goal last week. I'm just going to leave it as it is. And actually that doesn't work, because Lanzini's the person who does the least secure thing in possession and gives the goal away. So yeah, but subs win games. And I do think it is important to provide that little bit of context in saying that actually, although yes, we could have better squad depth than we do right now, we're never going to have Cavani, Rashford and Martial to bring off the bench. That's just not a possibility.
That comes from historical dominance. That comes from being Man United 20, 30 years ago, is allowing them to have those kind of options. It was a frustration, though, that and it's led to this kind of in the last few weeks I've had the what's the point of Krau question you see in certain sections, and it's a little bit reactive, but carries some weight. I suppose you'd argue Noble coming on 100% fresh, Krau coming on 100% fresh, they might not be the same as good as Lanzini when their conditions are exactly the same, but they're probably better than Fornals and Lanzini not having great games and at 50% of condition. Cal.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, either any of them really could have come on. It's just that freshness, and I think not even in terms of their ability to run around the pitch in that sense, but like Jack's already pointed out, the sort of mental freshness of being alert and sort of maybe taking, after 80 minutes, it takes you maybe a second longer to think about what you're going to do next, rather than if you just come on, you're sharp, you're on it. So yeah, I think that would have made a big difference. I think the Kraus situation is just bonkers, to be honest. I just don't know what we were thinking if we were just not going to play him. I understand that there's a clause in his contract that if he plays X amount of games, then we're obliged to pay the £15 million fee for him. So maybe it's got to a point where Moyes is now not seen enough to want to sign him, so is now hesitant to play him in the case we end up lumbered with a player that he doesn't actually want around the club. But I don't think he's played, unless the clause is like 5 games. I'm sure you can bring him on for like 10 minutes here and there. He's only had a few matches.
I can only guess he's thinking that I can only guess he's thinking he doesn't want to sign him, and if we do get an injury, then he's going to have to use him. So he wants him to be within the quota.
Yeah.
If he has to play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that would be my logic.
He's had COVID as well, and Moyes. There is the other side of the argument. You said Moyes can be very, very cautious in how he introduces new players, and maybe if COVID's taken a month or something like that off his development, there's the possibility.
That's fine though.
But Noble existed as well. I mean, at that point.
I think with a loan player as well, like it's fine taking your time to bed a player in that you've actually bought, but if you've only brought someone in on loan, then you kind of you should only bring in loan players that you're really expecting to be able to make an impact when you need them. Like there shouldn't really be a bedding in process, I don't think, with a loanee. Otherwise, like, what's the point?
Well, I kind of, it's just a funny one, isn't it? Because he went to the Euros saying that Krul was one of his players to look for. Krul was terrible at the Euros. And then I don't know whether Moyes has just got a closer look.
maybe he's made a point out there, but he's had a take. Look at this player. He's let him down and now he's just holding a grudge. And actually it's really pathetic. Maybe it's all about, you've ruined his punditry career in 10 years' time. I don't know. In terms of, if you're going to target tiredness, we've looked at the word tiredness. If I think of tiredness for one West Ham player, I think of, we've spoken about already, is Michail Antonio. And an interesting game. I don't know if I felt he had a bad game or a good game. He had one of those games where he can do some good things. And he had the off the ball running there, was strong for the kind of last chance that wasn't a chance, but then didn't really have the striker's impact either, Jack. And it's just the quandary of Michail Antonio, and the quandary of Michail Antonio is a big topic every transfer window, obviously.
Yeah, it continues to be one of the major talking points on West Ham forums, on West Ham Twitter. And I understand why it is. I think the criticism for him in this game was completely unnecessary. I think for the first hour of the match, he did a positive job of doing what he does very well. I think he came up against Harry Maguire, who, might not be the Harry Maguire we knew him to be at Leicester every week for Man United, but he definitely was in this game. I think he was excellent for Man United, and sometimes that's it's not even a sometimes thing. I just think it's so difficult sometimes to present analysis because people just latch onto watching 11 players versus training cones, and that's just not football. Sometimes you have to, but not sometimes. That's why I said not sometimes. Always, you have to look at the 22 players on the pitch, and Harry Maguire was excellent. He was excellent throughout the 90 minutes.
You'd argue that his game suits an Antonio. He's not always the most polished performer himself, Maguire, but he's strong and he's got a turn of pace when he gets going. And Antonio is kind of like that.
Yeah, but the thing is you want to catch Maguire at the moment that he turns, because the turn in itself is slow. Everything else is fine. But look, I think the last 2 games he's come in for lots of criticism, and actually Pascal Struijk was outstanding for Leeds. And at that point, I thought that was one of the best centre-back performances I'd seen against us all season. And I think Harry Maguire was excellent for Man United. So I think he's come up against 2 centre-backs in their best form, having some of their best games of the season. And I think he still had an impact in both games. I think against Leeds, he caused problems, and against Man United, he caused problems. I think he made Varane look very uncomfortable every time he was in a 1v1 with Varane. I think his running in behind Varane caused United a lot of problems. I think his doubling up with Bowen on Tellez at times to cause issues down that side was very sensible. I think his movement off the ball for long stretches was very good. And then I think what you latch onto really is that by the 60th, 65th minute, the bloke is knackered, quite clearly knackered. And look, you can't blame him for not having the fitness as a 31-year-old with an extremely long injury history that's come all the way through non-league. for not having the fitness to go 90 minutes 3 times a week. It's just, or even week in, week out at Premier League level. It's just not a realistic expectation. And this is a guy that came to us from Nottingham Forest, started out at Tooting and Mitcham, came to us as a winger, became a fullback, and is now playing up front and has scored a boatload of goals for us. Why are we then suddenly turning around and saying, well, because you're not scoring 2 every week, like you should be, like some sort of elite top 10 striker in the world, you're therefore shit? It's just not how it works. Your striker needs to have an impact on every game, and there was a stretch of this season where he wasn't having an impact on every game. That was around the Arsenal game. That's not what's happening at the moment. He is having an impact on every game. He might not be scoring, but he deserves credit for what he's doing at the moment, which is a useful job. And he said it himself. He said it earlier this season. He would like another striker to come in to challenge him because he feels he needs that support. And this was a perfect example of a game where really 60 minutes, he should have come off and someone else should have come on. Or if he didn't have the fitness to go 90, he should have been the last 30 minutes impact substitute that wins us the game.
And he's getting criticism now, I would feel, not because of him, but because of who isn't there. And a frustration in a fan base that it's the 25th of January as of now, to date the podcast. And
cheers for that.
Yeah. And good luck with the edits. It's not my problem.
I'll get going as soon as we finish and get it out by midnight.
They'll all know now. And he's 3+ weeks then of a transfer window, and people wanted a striker on the first. It wasn't going to happen. But he is getting a level of kind of, the argument as well doesn't help. He's getting people frustrated because of what he isn't or what he hasn't got with him. And also because there is this argument, and it's a fair argument, about what you're looking at as a striker who is to play alongside, is to play in the same squad as, or to replace Antonio Cal. And it's an interesting discussion around that. I know when you kind of started months ago when we were talking about the podcast of the things you would look at for Antonio, you are looking at a specific type of skill set that he's got.
Yeah, it's a very broad one because we ask Antonio basically to do everything in attack. And I think in part, that's kind of why the frustration comes, I think, is because we're almost setting him up to fail really past the 60th minute mark, is because for 90 minutes we try and run everything through him, and Antonio is consistently involved in the most offensive duels per 90 at West Ham, consistently attempting the most dribbles per 90 at West Ham, consistently receiving the most passes per 90 at West Ham. And like, that's fine to do it for 60 minutes, but to expect someone, like Jack said, with his track history of injuries and stuff, to be able to be the focal point every minute of every game, every season is just completely unsustainable. And I think that's probably the main thing when you're looking to find what is essentially a unicorn in Antonio, because there's not many people out there that can do all this to the level that he can. But yeah, it's just really frequency of output. Like offensive duels, he's constantly up there in the Premier League and Europe's top 5 leagues as a striker who is involved so frequently. Quite often, some of the best strikers that you'll see are actually involved in like almost half the number of offensive duels, because they don't really get involved in the dribbles, and they don't really occupy spaces on the flanks. They'll just hover around the center and wait for the teammates to bring the ball to them. Whereas Antonio, like we've seen in recent games, some of his most effective moments have been when he's gone, actually, you know what, the centre back's doing a number on me today. Against Leeds, I think he had really powerful impact coming in on the left, and people were like, oh, why is he out wide? Why is he out wide? And really, it's just because he has to do everything. He has to go and hit those channels, but also he can. So like, why wouldn't you? I don't know. But yeah, it does make it a unicorn, because like we said, there's always going to be something that someone can't do that Antonio can do. And then it's like, oh, well, he's not good enough. And I do wonder if perhaps that's why Moyes is taking so long, is because he's wasting his time trying to find someone that doesn't exist. It's not possible.
Is that where we are with our recruitment? We have you if you're looking at this, you have to accept a drop off in certain areas. If you're trying to bring someone in, you're not going to get an Antonio. You're going to have to compromise somewhere and maybe accentuate the strengths that they have. That Antonio there is the problem that people get very, very annoyed that you're not saying Antonio's a unicorn because he's the best player in the world. We're saying that he's asked to do a lot, and he does very well at doing a lot of things. That doesn't mean, as we've discussed recently, his passing isn't always brilliant. And so you're looking at compromising somewhere and maybe accentuating something else.
Well, the drawbacks you get with Antonio are his volume of dispossessions and miscontrols per 90, which are high compared to other strikers, really high compared to other strikers, and his fitness. So we're definitely not describing Antonio as a guy who's got everything. What we're saying is that Antonio has drawbacks that we can cope with as a team. And I mean, for example, Sebastian Haller is a great striker, but didn't fit us. It wasn't a good fit for us. And to find a striker who's got Antonio's skill set without the drawbacks of miscontrols or dispossessions or fitness is an impossibility. You're not going to find it. You're going to have to compromise on something with whoever you look for.
You either look and go, okay, well, there's two ways of looking at it. Really, is like trying to find someone with similar strengths as Antonio, and you kind of, as much like we accept the drawbacks in Antonio's game, you also then accept the drawbacks in someone else's game because you're prioritizing essentially the strengths, or you find a striker who can be a good plan B that is good at the things that Antonio isn't good at, but might represent something of a drop off in dribbles or offensive duels, like we've said, but might be a more accomplished finisher or is more secure in possession because his passing's better or stuff like that. And it's trying to find that balance, which a lot of the good teams do have, because then if you do have that, you can start to look at each game, take it game by game and work out, oh, okay, well, these are the weaknesses of the opposition. So this is the striker we should use today to exploit those weaknesses because they're his strengths. But at the minute, we're at a position where we only have one striker. So there's going to be games where Antonio is more effective because you've got, I don't know, weak defenders or people that he can just harry and are poor under pressure, and then they concede possession and then we can make counters. Or you're going to have games like the other day where they've got a defense that can handle Antonio and then he's kind of made to look redundant. But if what we should be able to do is in that situation have someone that goes, okay, well, they can handle Antonio. Now let's bring on the other guy who's going to do something different and give them something else to worry about. And at the minute, we just don't have that.
Where I'd like to come to his defence as well. He's got 8 goals in the Premier League this year. He's probably on for about 15, maybe more. It's 8 from 21 games in the Premier League. Before this weekend, 3rd most chances in the Premier League created from open play, behind 5 behind Salah, 10 behind Bruno Fernandes. Those are,
miles out ahead of anyone outside the top 6, by the way.
Yeah. He's a top. I mean, in the list he's in, he's ahead of Grealish, Alexander-Arnold, Bernardo Silva, and Kevin De Bruyne, who join him in the list of people I had from that point. These are world-class talents, and Michail Antonio. We can't. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure Payet's probably still. He's not first anymore. Chances created since he's about 3rd still. No one's had that kind of impact on this team since then. You're looking at a player who's scoring. I mean, I don't remember the last time a West Ham player had 8, probably got close to 15 in a season anymore. Doesn't feel like that happens. It's kind of 10, 11 by the end, I guess. And you're creating chances at a Champions League elite kind of level.
That's it. He is the reason that people like Bowen are able to be so prolific recently, is because, okay, he might have a few games where he's not scoring, but his movement off the ball is allowing Bowen and stuff to get those chances that he might not get in a game. And that's good balance. And that's why it's so impossible to find, because that list of people you just said, like the fact that he is probably still coming up quite highly in terms of his non-penalty goal return this season in the Prem, but also is leading in chances created as well. Like there's not, apart from Salah, who, like you say, is probably one of the best players in the world, if not the best player in the world. The fact he's in that company is just crazy. And we're West Ham, like if you're looking for a player with that output, you're not going to be able to get him for the sort of money that we can afford.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to say was about the COVID schedule, just the impact on the scheduling and how that really negatively affects Antonio, because you see, I mean, look at Antonio at the start of this season, look at Antonio post restart when he is fully fresh and had long extended rests. He is impossible to deal with for any defense. And I think, we had the Norwich game postponement and then that being sandwiched in between 2 games. And I think some people would have looked at Moyes' reaction to that and gone, that's a bit of a over the top reaction. I mean, it's what Norwich leads. Why is that such a big deal? It's because we're so reliant on a player like Antonio. We're so reliant on him being fully fit and firing. And the impact on him is massive. It's disproportionate compared to other players.
I think that will tell come the end of the season that we've had a proper December. Some of our rivals haven't, and December's the hardest part of the season. I think it's going to end up. I don't think it's going to hurt them having those games stacking up, because I don't think they're all going to stack up in cute squashed packages in a month. It'll be across 8 weeks, and I think it's going to comfortably be pushed aside as something that's just happened. First time in my life I've ever enjoyed something I saw in a Chelsea programme, because I saw they'd listed how many of their games they had played since December compared to everyone else in the league. We were quite high up, but obviously some of their rivals a lot less. If we're talking then what we've been looking at in terms of Antonio, replacement competition, etc., a name that's come up today, and obviously you two are my transfer boys, especially Cal, Mohamed Bayo's name has kind of resurfaced. There's been rumours around. It's one that has gone up, gone down again. He won't be sold. Oh, he's signed a new contract. That means a bad thing, but actually the contract means he might be sold because, the games of transfers and the lies that we're told anyway. It's not what I'm massively in favour of. And I know obviously you two have written about him so far this winter. What are your thoughts on Bayo as those links resurface again?
Well, I don't know, man. There's as with anyone, there's pros and cons to it. I think the pros are that he has proven himself to be a really, really good finisher. I think there was big question marks coming into Ligue 1 this season about whether he would be able to maintain the form that he showed in Ligue 2. And prior to that, he was showing really good form in the third division of French football, and he's stepped up to Ligue 1 and really shown no drop off at all. Which is really impressive, and you've got to give him credit for that. I think he's on 1-2 form at the minute, which is great, and the sort of form that any striker at West Ham would be welcome to exhibit, which would be great. But he's in line with his XG as well, which is again good. And his goal conversion and shots on target rates are also really impressive and considerably higher than Antonio's. But that's probably as far as it goes for my pros of Bayo, or Bayo, however you want to say it. He doesn't really offer much else. Every other metric is pretty much lower than Antonio's, and particularly the important ones. His shot creation is not quite non-existent, but it's not on the level of Antonio at all. The one thing we pointed out earlier as being the really outlying metric for Antonio is how many offensive duels he's involved in a game. And I think at the minute, last time I checked, it was about 17 per 90 across this season. Bayo is involved in 6, which is 1 offensive duel every 15 minutes, which is just like, that is not Antonio, is it? Like, that's crazy. That's just couldn't be further from what Antonio is. And he's not a dribbler. He doesn't chart many progressive runs. So I guess in the sense of something different, a different option to bring on, a proven finisher, but I just don't see how he would slot very seamlessly into the system. I think it would require a lot of changes around him, and I'm not really willing to compromise on the system we've got at the minute, because I think it works really well.
I think I might have mentioned it before on the podcast, but if I haven't, you could generally, like, you could have a cap on and be smoking a pipe and be chilling in the box and waiting for everyone else to do their job. He's got Jim Alavina there at Clermont to do all of his running for him. So it's he's very, his involvement is very limited, and he sticks around the 6-yard box and the penalty spot and has a huge impact in those areas, but doesn't really add much else at all. I think he reminds me a lot of Eddie Nketiah when he was at Leeds in the Championship, as someone who just didn't have any impact because the team needed him to do more. Bielsa demands that kind of pressing forward, and Nketiah was just not the kind of striker they needed at all, despite being useful in other ways.
It's good that we've been linked regularly to Nketiah. That is.
Yeah, well, this is it. It doesn't scream a Moyes attacker either, really, does it? Because the one thing we've said consistently is that Moyes demands effort, and this guy's putting in no effort.
I suppose if you're looking at his, the 2 strikers that come to mind that he bought for Everton would be Darren Bent and James Beattie, that weren't glamour, but they would do a certain level of defensive work up top and occupy and work hard. He has kind of repeatedly shown in the past that he will buy a striker more for that than their goal scoring. So it would look like Bayo is the opposite in many respects.
Yeah, and also I think about other strikers that that he signed at Yakubu, or even at was an Ichibi seemed to follow him around, and Louis Sahar, I think I remember as well. Just players who were such handfuls and just offered so much other than goal scoring and caused so many other problems. And I think Moyes' utilization of strikers in that way is really positive. In that you don't really necessarily need some sort of dead-eyed finisher at the top end of the pitch. Certainly not when you're not in that sort of top six area of the league. When you're looking to sort of push into that as a team below that, having someone who offers loads of other things in that position is really what you're looking for, because those are the players you can buy. Those are the players who are available to you on the market. The dead-eye finishers are the Sebastian Haller's of the world, the people that you pay £45 million for, and then you don't have the creative talent around them to be able to make them look brilliant. It doesn't really work at that level.
You're not looking for the final piece, I guess, in that say maybe Man City or maybe a I don't know, a Liverpool, Man United, etc. Even though most of those teams now are going for those. I think you've said in your articles. I don't think that line's come up in my head from my own thoughts. I'm pretty sure you've put it there. That these teams are using these kind of either converted wingers or these more all-round forwards anyway.
Yeah, well, it's the general trend in the league is to use these more dynamic forwards that have much more developed skill sets. I think that's the general trend in football, to be honest with you.
It just makes you less predictable, doesn't it? It means that your attack has so much more dynamism to it, and then it's therefore much harder to defend against. It'd be a lot easier to defend against a striker with the quality of the defending that's available in the Premier League. A striker who just kind of chills in the box, and he's going to get marked out of most games, I would imagine. But yeah,
I just think, look, if you took Jim Alavina and I think it's Rashani out of the Clermont team, I don't think you'd see the same kind of returns for Bayo at all. And I don't think we've got those kind of players or play that kind of way that would enable him to be successful for us. And actually, who knows whether he's even got the success, the quality to be successful in the Premier League. There've been a lot of players like this that have been linked over the years. Dia's one I constantly come back to, that people were really excited about Dia, and I was very quick to shoot that one down because, again, just quality around him, hot streak, quality of the league, general quality of the actual player, just tells you that the level isn't quite there, and that's kind of been proven with Dia since, and I think you'd see similar with Bayo.
You've had 25 days. I know you've got names stored up, and we'll leave 6 of those in the future for you to tempt and tease with. But if you were looking at kind of a name you've either talked about or not talked about, and I'm going to talk about, or whoever, who are you thinking of? Who would you say would be the fit right now? At least to give an idea for listeners to go and have a look at that kind of player and think that's the kind of attribute or that's the kind of person that would fit a mold.
He's been linked before, hasn't he, Cal?
Yeah. So I think we'd probably say Embolo, Breel Embolo from Mönchengladbach.
I love Embolo. I love Embolo.
He's great. I think you've only got to look at the involvements in the attack. I think Embolo was, I think, so far the only player we've covered that actually has more offensive duels per 90 than Antonio.
I think I might be out on a limb here, but I think he might be top in the top 5 leagues in Europe for strikers.
There you go. Which is, the first thing that sort of caught my attention is, he could probably be a apt replacement, cover, successor, whatever way you want to look at it. And then you look at the rest of his numbers, and he performs really well across the board. Actually, his shot creation's good. His dribbling's really impressive. His finishing has improved year on year, which is a really good sign. He just seems to fit numerically. But then also, I think another key aspect that you can't track in terms of data analysis is physical profile. Like, that's a really important thing for Antonio. It's kind of what makes him so effective, is his strength, his raw pace, and that sort of stuff. And that's another match on Embolo. Similar heights, similar frames, similar speed, similar strength. Like, it just seems to be a perfect fit, really, for me. And I don't think he would necessarily be that expensive. I think he'd probably be attainable for us. Maybe not this window, but a summer move.
one of the a trio. It's Mönchengladbach have the trio, don't they? That
They
we
and
seem to,
Thuram, yeah.
yeah, we seem to get linked with one of them kind of every other week. It seems to be
Yeah.
on a bit of one of those, the most suitable of the three, and possibly the cheapest. I mean, Thuram seems to me like he'd be the one that they would sell for the high amounts.
Play would be the cheapest.
Play.
Mbolo's the middle option. I think really what they're looking for is to sell to Ram and continue with Mbolo and
Yeah.
Play. That would be their preferred option, I imagine. But Mbolo, I mean, like Cal's talked about how great a match is in some areas, but also, I mean, one of the things that I would absolutely love about it is he's got the flexibility to play anywhere across the front four. So you could play him with Antonio. So it's not like you'd have to completely limit his game time. He can come in and do a job at number 10. He can be a goal scoring 10. He's done that this season for Mönchengladbach. And madly, he's such a close statistical match to Antonio. As you look at the dispossessions and miscontrols, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. Fit and the same drawback. It's the same fitness drawback. That's the same thing. It's a long spotty injury history, and a lot of people will go, whoa, we don't want someone with a long spotty injury history. But that really is a drawback to get such a complete player who hasn't had massive, similar to Antonio, sort of stabilized the fitness issues to smaller injuries.
Because it's big ankle. Did he? Big ankle injuries.
I think you might be right with ankle, but it was a big injury when he first moved to Germany, and then repeated instances of this injury keeping out. But I don't think he's had a problem with that injury for something like 18 months, 2 years, maybe even longer.
No, you'll be shocked that I might actually know something about a player. You may know of one player I was arguing over the summer that I really liked and wanted us to sign was Brian Mbolo. So I've looked at these, and I think the ankle injury recurred, but it recurred kind of early. And so whether it was not healed properly and something's done, so whether that's kind of, you could almost take that as one long injury in a way, because it's not quite suffered. So you don't know that that's going to be perfect. Even it may have issues it's hard to tell. Sometimes these players get injuries and it means injury somewhere else affects how they change their movement, and it ends up more injuries. But he looks like he's recovering. I think he had an illness injury in one of those time off, if I remember, from Transfer Market as well, where people are saying, well, he's missed games. Yeah, but he was ill for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like, it's a little bit unfair to say he's got fitness issues if he's got the flu. I mean, it's just one of those things that might happen. So yeah, I was delighted to hear that. If I'm going to go to another name that's come up today, different position, but a position we've talked about on and on and on and on. It's a left-sided centre-back. Duje Caleta-Car, who I like. Thank you. I know. Yeah, it should be noted that I not only asked Jack, but also went to a website to listen to how it was said. That's not just because I'm, moved on from what I called Kanate Kunyate the other day, and I've learned a thing or two. This time I've just practiced. Yeah, you wrote about him today. I as I said when I kind of discussed the day with you earlier, obviously that wasn't a coincidence. His name has come strong in through different sources about possibly linked to a loan move. Marseille want the transfer, if anything, and he's in an odd situation of a player who's looks like he plays well, but just isn't particularly favoured.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird one when I was doing the research for this one, trying to work out whether he's got a beef with Sampaoli or whether he's got a beef with Longoria, because him and Longoria had a very public falling out.
If I'm just for anyone who doesn't know who owns Marseille, I'm presuming he's the chairman of Marseille.
He's the president. He's the director of football at Marseille. He's a bit of a famed character in French football, actually, because he's sort of this. The way he dealt with the Villas-Boas thing was really mad. Like, it's very confrontational style, and they signed Cham behind Villas-Boas' back. Marseille were doing not brilliantly at the time, but had a brilliant season before under Villas-Boas, and Villas-Boas came out in his press conference and just looked really crestfallen and sort of said, "I didn't want Cham. I don't understand. I rejected Cham, and then he's arrived anyway. The club's making repeated transfer mistakes, the same as the last 3 years." And resigned. And then Longoria, being Longoria, instead of like announcing that Villas-Boas had resigned, came out and said, "No, we sacked him before he said he'd resigned." So he's been suspended so we can sack him. So it's that sort of very confrontational style, and similar with Caleta-Car, who didn't want to leave in the summer. We were very interested. Some people might look at that as a bit of an issue because he definitely turned us down in the summer.
There are some delicate flowers in our fan base.
Yeah. But similarly
Good for quality.
confrontational there. It was reported in the local press that Longoria had fallen out with Caleta-Car over that, and that the player was going to be subject to like a disciplinary hearing internally for refusing to leave. When they were trying to force him out, and therefore would be demoted. At the time, there were suggestions that he was going to be demoted to the B team, which I think play in like the 4th division in France or something. So there was this very public falling out with Longoria. And not Caleta-Car's first very public falling out with a key member of staff. He did have one with the entire Croatian national setup as well. So that may be a slight issue. He claims that the Croatian one was made up. The Croatian national team suggested that he went on holiday rather than coming on international duty, and claimed that he'd been told not to go by Villas-Boas, but actually wanted to go on holiday. He says he was told by the club that he couldn't go, and just decided to go on a break because he was on a break anyway. So why should he be punished for that? But anyway, he's had these 2 very public falling outs, and then it's difficult to know really now. As you said, he's not been favoured very much this season. Should be said he does play nearly every game when they play a back 4, but somehow he does like the sort of Bielsa style 3-3-3-1 thing. He doesn't play when they play that, and it's difficult to know whether his beef is with Sampaoli or whether it's more with Longoria, and that it's just being made very clear to him where the door is. So that he definitely leaves in this window. And Marseille are now more keen than they've ever been, really, with the transfer ban coming up because of the Pap Gay stuff. They desperately want to make sales now so they don't lose Kamara and Caleta-Car on freeze and massively damage their squad without having any chance to reinvest in this window.
It's interesting that Longaria's sounding like a bit of a desperate housewife. That's a great joke, and I'm really proud of that. Thank you very much. Numbers-wise, then, and opinions-wise, we've got the backstory, Cal. What's the player?
Yeah, okay. So he's I suppose there's 3 areas in centre-backs that we've kind of focused on in the articles as being really important. Obviously, defensive, aerial, and then what their contribution is like in build-up. And I would say that there's 2 that he excels in, and 1 that he is less excellent in, and unfortunately the one that he is less excellent in is defensively. He seems to be very up and down throughout his career. He's had some seasons where he's been really good. His defensive dual success rates have previously been like 70%, which is considerably better than all of our centre backs bar Zouma. And if Zouma is the benchmark, then I mean, yeah, you know that they're decent. But I think last season and this season it's been nowhere near that sort of level. I think I saw one stretch where he was at about 58%, which 58% of defensive duels for a centre back is really not up to scratch at all. And I think it's probably now mid 60s, which is about the same as Ogbonna, which might surprise some people because I think he's got a reputation as being a really sterling defender, which he is, but his actual on the ground duel sort of level is not as impressive as we might all assume. So yeah, defensively, there's a lot left to be desired. I mean, he's by no means like a terrible defender, but I don't think he would be. His numbers aren't at the level that I would like a centre back that we're targeting to come in as a marked improvement.
Are they better than Diop's?
They're actually surprisingly similar in defensive duels, but there's his miscontrols and like his mistakes leading to loss of possession are considerably lower, which I think is what gets Diop the really bad rep, is his lack of concentration in possession. His actual tackling and stuff isn't that bad and has never been that bad
I'm being unfair.
Throughout his career. No, it's right. It's right to point it out, and it's the sort of numbers that you don't necessarily tend to look at, but those sort of miscontrols and stuff are really important for a team like us who can struggle in possession at the back. But yeah, I think so. Defensively, not amazing. Aerially, on the other hand, ridiculous. He's insanely good. One of the best in Europe. It's like 68.5 last season. It was 75% of aerial duels he won. But he is 6'4", so I suppose that is an advantage. But not everyone who's tall is good in the air, as Diop has proven. They're actually the same height. So Yeah, and then where he really, really does shine, and I think this is what he gets a lot of the attention for, and rightly so because he is excellent at it. But his passing, his range of passing, the effectiveness of his passing is crazy. He's consistently posted 90% pass success rates. He's a very frequent progressive passer, and his progressive passing success is up there in the 80s, which is crazy. So to have someone who is recording like double the amount of successful progressive passes than any of our centre backs would undoubtedly be a really solid acquisition in an area of the pitch that we really do need to upgrade in. But I think as much as he would bring in build up, I would probably be looking to hopefully bring in someone who can do both. There are people out there. We've looked at Senesi, who is as good progressively as Caleta-Car is, but is also turning out 75% defensive dual success rate and is as good in the air. So there are players out there who would probably come in a similar price point. Senesi perhaps slightly more expensive. But I'm of the opinion that if we're going to bring in a defender to replace a defender who is really bad at defending, we should bring in a defender who is really good at defending. Otherwise, how much of an improvement is it?
You can know all the analytics in the world, but that sentence is simplified and correct, isn't it? I mean, Jack, you've got the tactical. Is there anything in how he would fit into a Moyes team? Is he being asked to defend slightly differently at Marseille? I don't know. You know, I'm pushing you hard there to basically have an understanding of all of Marseille's play, which is a little bit unfair. But also, you know, Moyes probably. You'd expect Moyes to be getting. He's a good coach for defenders. In at least it feels like he is to get more out of them as well.
No, he's definitely a good coach for defenders. He's got a wonderful track record with defenders. Frankly, he's got a wonderful track record with most positions. Look at his track record with left backs. Look at his track record with strikers. It's pretty good across the board, really. Defensive midfielders the same. Yeah, I think you can point to Moyes' coaching as being something that would help develop him. I must admit, like I haven't had huge amounts of time to watch Jorge Sampaoli at Marseille. I've probably seen about 4 or 5 games, and then half of those have been called off due to things being thrown on the pitch. So I've probably only caught 45 minutes here or there.
Systems when you are catching them, so yeah.
Which has been frustrating because it would have been nice to have seen more of him this season. And then sometimes when I've watched them, they've been playing the 3 back, so he's not even been there. So it's been difficult to actually see him play for Sampaoli's Marseille. But we did talk about the tactics a little bit in the article, and that was more really about sort of stylistic similarities to Zouma. And the fact that Zouma records a very low number of pressures per 90. He's more of a passive defender in that he allows the striker to receive the ball and then times his tackle very well, and then is very successful when he does that. He's not necessarily someone who's super proactive. So I talk about this in the article, but the comparison, which is not on level, but in terms of sort of the approach of having 2 centre backs and how they function together. If you look at Matip and Van Dijk, who've been really successful together at Liverpool, you have one who goes and one who stays, and the one who stays has the athleticism to do the covering and also the timing of the tackle and all of that stuff. And Zuma's very much that guy for us, I think, in that sort of Van Dijk mold. And then Caleta-Car has the lowest pressures of any centre-back in Ligue 1. He's the least aggressive defender in Ligue 1. So I'm not saying you can't do this. You absolutely can do this. But in my head, I am sort of struggling to see how it works when you have 2 centre-backs who both retreat. And then if Caleta-Car was an excellent tackler, then I can see it. Okay, they both retreat, but they're brilliant at timing their tackles. But they both retreat, and then Caleta-Car is absolutely terrible in the tackle. I know, Cal, you were quite kind in terms of talking about his defensive dual success rate, because that includes a lot of other things.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at him directly against dribblers, like it has improved this season, but then it's a small sample size. He's only played a handful of games, 33 games last season, 43% dribblers tackled, which is absurdly low for a centre-back who's as hyped as he is. So there's this kind of horrible image in my mind of someone who backs off, and then doesn't get the tackle right, and then there isn't the time for the partner to recover. So obviously there are aspects to his game that are very strong, but my biggest question mark over him isn't really about him as a player. Is Zouma the right partner for him?
Mm-hmm.
I suppose it's that interesting. Does Ogbonna do that work that you would want one of the two to be doing in that partnership? Does Ogbonna go and engage?
No, Ogbonna doesn't engage. But again, I think Ogbonna's got really low stats for being dribble pass and stuff. But I think one of the things that doesn't come up at all for Ogbonna, and it's something you can't really track analytically, is his experience in decision making is just on such a high level compared to loads of centre backs, really, and that isn't tracked at all. And I think really, with that level of experience and how well he handles himself against most strikers in the Premier League, you can kind of put him with anyone because he's got that kind of seasoned, grizzled, professional kind of thing.
Older centre back kind of thing.
Yeah. Whereas I think Duje Caleta-Car, younger, and probably need someone with him who's got the experience of the league and stuff. And Zouma is that, but I don't really know if the two would work that brilliantly together. And if you look at how he's been, where he's been successful this season, he's been partnered with William Saliba, who has been absolutely magnificent for Marseille this season and is a proactive defender. So I don't know. He's a good player, and his passing would definitely bring us a lot, and he's an absolute monster in the air. But I'm not entirely sure that he's got all the attributes to bring the best out of Kurt Zouma, who I do see as a really seriously elite Premier League centre-back for 7 or 8 years to come.
Well, that's kind of where we are, and we're done with. We've got a week, I suppose, 6 days, 6 busy days for you as that comes to an end. We don't know what we're coming back with next week quite yet, do we? We haven't got a game.
Well, we know what we're doing in 6 days from.
Yes. Actually, we've got a bit of a free hit for us because there's no game next week, so we can be a little bit creative with the podcast. And I'll show you on tenterhooks already. What are we gonna do? Crazy podcast. It's going to be an all visual medium. It's just going to be done by dance. No, it gives us a chance to really go deep on transfers. Probably have a look around, not just us, but the teams around as well, and just see what's happened. And it's obviously going to be a crazy week. I will like to let you know that I did pitch discussing at one point Jesse Lingard, but the panel have disagreed with me and they're kind of tired of Jesse Lingard. So we may have to, were things to happen, but if not, we'll just we've all watched him. He played for us. You kind of know what he is. You'll be all right, I reckon. So until next week and our mime only podcast. I can wish you all a pleasant evening, and we will see you next time. Good night.
Right, so we're here in the offices of a Late Late Show with the host of a Late Late Show, James Corden.
Hi.
Big West Ham fan.
Yes. And big knees up Mother Brown man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm regularly on the general discussion page. There's always someone who's got some information, so I love it. Yeah. It's great. Yes, it's excitement surrounded by imminent disappointment. That's what it mostly is.
Get on the forum at kumb.com. Come on, you irons.